Thank you. អ្នកជនដែលបានចូលរួមនៅទីនេះផ្ទាល់នឹងទស្សនាការផ្សាយផ្ទាល់តាមរយៈបណ្ដាញសង្គម Facebook និង Telegram ជាទីគោរពមេត្តាជ្រាបថាកម្មវិធីវេទិកាបច្ចេកវិទ្យាហិរញ្ញវត្ថុនៃពិព័រណ៍បច្ចេកវិទ្យាកម្ពុជាឆ្នាំ2022នាថ្ងៃទី2នៃព្រឹកនេះនឹងប្រព្រឹត្តទៅជាភាសាអង់គ្លេសចា៎សូមអរគុណ A very good morning, all excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the FinTech stage of Cambodia Tech Expo 2022. My name is Ten Yanut, and I am pleased to be your host once again for this morning's sessions. Before we proceed to today's agenda, I would like to inform all excellency, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, there are QR codes on either side of the event hall, which you can scan to access the FinTech stage website, where you can also find the agenda for the 3 days event. In case of any attendees encounters any issue, please raise your hand and you will be assisted shortly. All Excellency, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, kindly be informed that the FinTech stage of CTH 2022 will be live broadcast on the official Facebook page and Telegram channel of the Techo Startup Center and Digital Economy and Business Committee. The cross-sharing post from Cambodian Association of Finance and Technology and Prudential Cambodia. Before the FinTech stage of CTH 2022 officially commences, I would like to inform all Excellency, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, of the following instructions. Please kindly put your mobile device on mute for the duration of the event when presented inside the event hall. We appreciate your cooperation. On behalf of the organizer of the FinTech stage of CTH 2022, I would like to sincerely thank our main sponsors, including the Advanced Bank of Asia for being our diamond sponsor, Khmer Enterprise for being our platinum sponsor, Prudential Cambodia, SME Bank of Cambodia, Credit Guarantee Corporation of Cambodia, and FWD Life Insurance for being our gold sponsor. I would also like to inform all Excellency, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, of the event's agenda, Day 2 morning session, which is as follows. The first agenda is the presentation on banking and digitalization by Ms. Ivana Trachini, Country Director of Visa. Next is the presentation on KQR and Bakong by Mr. Heng Chesda, Deputy Director of Information Technology Department from National Bank Cambodia. Next is the presentation on open banking by Mr. Napong Thawat Pongtikit, Director at Bank of Thailand. Next, presentations on open banking by Mr. Anik Islam, Regional Business Lead of Prangkas. After the first presentation, we will have a break for 20 minutes. The second agenda is the panel discussion on banking and digitalization, moderated by Mr. Jim Kagai, Founder and Managing Partner, DQD Consulting Co. Ltd., along with our 4 panelists, Mr. Baxworth Rosmitov, Head of Internet Banking for Business Advanced Bank of Asia. Second, Mr. Han Peng Kwang, Chief Executive Officer of Wing Bank. Third, Mr. Kia Boran, Chief Executive Officer of AMK Microfinance. Fourth, Dr. Swai Hai, Senior Vice President and Senior Head of Strategic Planning Division of Esilida Bank. The last agenda is a lunch break time. Before starting the event, I would like to respectfully request all Excellency, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, to stand up in honor of the national anthem. Greetings, All Excellency, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Please be seated. Without further delay, I am pleased to introduce you to our first honorable presenter, Mr. Ivana Trachini, Country Director of Visa, to deliver her presentation on banking and digitalization. All Excellency, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ms. Ivana Trachini.
Good morning. Sorry, I felt like I might need to walk around a little bit, so I'm better to be mobile. My name's Ivana Tranchini. I'm the country manager for Visa here in Cambodia. It's a great honour to be able to speak with you all this morning. I know it's early on a Saturday morning. The team at CUFT asked me to talk a little bit about digitisation in banking today. And I guess the reason they asked us to talk about it is because we've spent about 60 years digitising cash. Now, in different places around the world, we have different developments into how much we've been able to digitise cash. And my experience is probably in markets where that is further along the road. But with that experience comes some interesting learnings, but also I've been able to identify a number of opportunities where in markets around ASEAN, and particularly in Cambodia, we're probably going to be able to move a lot faster than that development. So I'm going to talk a little bit less on the banking and technical side today, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about the philosophy, some of the learnings from a strategic perspective that we can take away, but also then how we're thinking about it in our organisation, just very briefly at the end. This is an insurance policy from my legal team. Basically, it just covers me in case you guys take my advice and it doesn't work. So this is an old slide. 30 years ago, McKinsey made a prediction that there would be maximum 900,000 mobile phones in the world ever. That was 30 years ago. In 1999, that number represented just 1% of all of the mobile phones. Now, I'm not here to talk about the growth of smartphones, but what this tells us is that technology and technology development is actually really hard to predict. It's actually said that AT&T, which is the biggest telephone company or mobile company in the US, actually pulled out of the mobile phone market around that time because they thought, okay, well, it's never going to stick, right? It's not going to scale. Obviously, they were wrong, and then they were in a really back position when all of a sudden their competitors started coming up around them. And this really talks a little bit about the notion of the law of accelerating returns. And, this is not about the theory, but the idea that, we're going to see probably 20,000 years of technological advancement in a century. And that kind of exponential growth is something that we need to get our heads around. And whilst this is something we all know, and actually we've been talking about it for a really long time, I still see examples today in clients' businesses, in partners' businesses, in our own businesses at times, where we try to apply a linear thought process to development and to transformation and to digitization, an idea of a start and an end. Because as humans, that notion of something being linear with a start and an end is comfortable. It's kind of how we have been wired. And we can see that in the minds of some business leaders. So this is a study that was done by Forrester in 2020. And they asked 110 technology leaders if they could describe where they were on the digitisation journey, on their digitisation transformation, for example. And you can see from this that 20%, so over a fifth of those technology leaders, the people that the CEOs were putting their faith in to make sure that their businesses were future-proofed, were saying, I think we're done for now. We're done. Start and an end. No intention of actually continuing that journey. And that's where some of this kind of mentality is quite limiting and can be quite scary at the same time. And the reason it's scary is because traditionally, when we think about, development, particularly technology development, we think return on investment. Let's find the biggest channel with the most customers that we can invest in and grow and focus. It's all about focus. So, for example, in the banking world, that might be mobile, right? So we think, let's spend most of our investment dollars on the mobile app and we'll get everyone to go to the mobile app and that's where we're going to focus. The problem is, that's not necessarily where all the customers are. The channels and the touch points for many of our customers are actually quite fragmented. There's new direct channels like WhatsApps or Telegram. There's indirect channels like social networking and other social media sites. There's embedded platforms, so customers who are expecting to be able to access their banking and finances in commerce, in Amazon, in any of these other broader platforms. And then underpinning all of that, and kind of as part of that expectation, I guess, or those places that the customers want to be, there's that notion of personalisation and the fact that it's not good enough that I feel like I'm just getting a product without it really reflecting what I need right now. And so that expectation of personalisation hits all of those touch points. So what about personalisation? It's a really tough one, and it's a paradox, I guess, that challenges many organisations, challenges many marketers mostly. The fact that we have to personalise for the masses. How do you personalise for the masses? How do you make strategic investments and be able to make everybody feel engaged and special, whilst not spending all of your money and whilst not making any returns? It's a very hard one to solve. And the way I think about it, this notion of mass personalisation in the digital world, is through the analogy of a map. So we have dumb digitisation and we have, modern digitisation. So dumb digitisation is where you would take a map, say a physical map, and turn it into a digital version, and it shows you how to get from A to B, and everyone sees the same map of how to get from A to B. You have to figure out where you start, you have to figure out where the end is, and basically there seems to be only one road. But what if I don't want to take that road? What if that road doesn't have what I want on it? What if I want to stop for a coffee? What if I need to take my dog for a run in the park? What if I need to stop for other reasons? This road and this map may not be overly helpful. Useful to a point, but probably not as good as it could be. So we need to move to a different form of digitisation, right? And many of you would have probably, actually, maybe just me, because I'm still new to the city, but on my way here today, I needed a smarter map because I didn't really know where I was going and I didn't know what direction. And I needed to be able to stop for a coffee on the way because it was very early. Thanks to Weena and the team for the the start slot, and I needed to make sure I got there on time. So I needed to know what time I left. I needed to leave my house in order to get there in time. And that's for me, right? Other people might not have needed that kind of service or needed to know where all those other things were. And they could have just got here, probably took a driver and arrived within 10 minutes. But that notion is something that we just need to be considering, because doing a one size fits all is just not, it's not actually acceptable anymore. It's not acceptable to many consumers or small businesses, particularly small businesses, because they're the ones that are probably the most underserved in this space today. And I mean that from in this region, but globally as well, especially in places like the UK, the US, Australia. Everyone's grappling with that notion. And of course, we all know this, that in order to deliver that outcome, we're going to need some better information. We're going to need some better ways to read that information. It's going to become the oil that, or maybe in this case, the wind in a more sustainable world, that powers how we engage, how we run our businesses, what our strategies, how our strategies are brought to life. And it also helps us break down to new business models. Now, traditional business models are all about scale, right? When I lived in New Zealand, we were a market of 5 million people. We'd often have global companies come and speak to me and ask me about what the market was like. Should we come into New Zealand? It's a bit small. We're never going to get scale. So why should we come to New Zealand? 5 million people. Australia's 25 million. Doesn't make sense. And I dare say some markets in Southeast Asia are challenged with that same question, but we can't scale. The challenge and the problem with scale as a business model is that it really only works if everyone gets the same thing and the distribution channels are relatively physical. And it's great because you do get a somewhat cost advantage from that mass production and mass distribution. But the barriers to entry are really high. So the cost and the investment to get the business model of scale going are up here. And that doesn't work when you're trying to be experimental or you're trying to be innovative. You don't have that kind of funding, especially not in this market where venture capital is being pulled out of the system and everyone's being a lot more conservative. So what if we tried a different model? And this is the model we're seeing a lot more, particularly in banking and particularly in the FinTech sector. The unscaled model. The model of mass personalisation. The model of targeting niches. So, for example, in the US and the UK, we've seen an incredible phenomenon of FinTech and neobanks that are focusing on one niche customer set. Women in rural areas, or first jobbers, or African American low income persons, or migrants new to the market. Whole banks being set up to serve one niche. And how do they do that when it costs so much? Because they're all digital. Their distribution is digital. You're taking away the physical distribution network. And the barrier, therefore, to entry is really low. And you only need a little bit of funding to test and learn and evolve and grow. Now, we all know that, right? I think we all know that intuitively. But convincing investors in your business to go from scale to unscale, I think we're still on that journey, if we're really honest with ourselves. And it's interesting to watch how this move from scale to unscale is playing out in the banking sector globally. So if we think about the cycle, or the competitive cycle as I like to call it, you've got incumbents and then you've got the new neobanks that come in. They have a totally different business model. They don't care about revenue. They're not looking at interest income. They just want to get customers. Just get as many customers as we can in the door. That is the measure of success. So if you're measuring your success on customer numbers, yet your competitor is measuring success on revenue per customer or net interest income, you're not actually playing in the same field. The customers, the neobank who's focused on the customers and is bringing the customers in at all costs, they're taking the customers from over here. So then what do the incumbents do? They react. And this is where the second wave of competition comes in. And we've seen this with the likes of JP Morgan Chase, where Royal Bank of Scotland, ANZ in Australia, where they've developed offshoots, digital-only banks, set up separately with different reporting lines, different infrastructure, so they can try and be competitive. And then that starts the second cycle, and we're starting it again. But then what happens is consumer expectations keep changing. The incumbents think that they've been able to digitise, but really they've still got these kind of core expectations of the ownership structure, and they tend to get flummoxed by change and by turbulence. And the winners are the ones that see the change and the turbulence and just evolve. And a really good example of this is Revolut up in the corner. Some of you may know Revolut as a neobank, one of the first out of the UK, incredibly successful globally, has moved into many markets. Now, their whole niche when they launched was cross-border payments, making it easy for people to move money around the world and cost effectively. Now, I did promise myself I wouldn't use the word pandemic in this presentation, but enter 2020, and all of a sudden their niche disappears. So they've got a whole heap of customers using their platform for a very specific reason, and that reason has now gone. What do? They pivoted really, really quickly. They started moving into savings products. They started doing loyalty platforms based on domestic spend. More interestingly, which you might this week decide is actually not the smartest idea, they moved into cryptocurrency. So they decided that, with that turbulence, they're going to change, and they could do that really quickly because they have the unscaled model. So bringing it back to the theme of digitalization and banking, and how do we do it? What can we learn? What's the theory, the investment theory? I would dare say that many of you would probably go, well, should I be investing in AI? Should I be focusing on big data? Should I be focusing on IoT? Should I be focusing on APIs, SaaS? I'd argue that it's actually none of those things. The actual question is not what's the digital strategy, what's the transformation that needs to take place? And therefore, with the transformation, what's the business strategy? What's the customer intimacy strategy? What's the SME support strategy? What's your workforce empowerment strategy? And how is digital and technology going to help you deliver on that? So rather than thinking about APIs and AI and ML and IoT and any other acronym that you can possibly conjure up, and we've got a whole heap of them in our business, trust me, let's start thinking about, well, what is actually that we need to deliver and for who? So that's the theory I put out there. And I guess in our business, from a Visa point of view, globally, we're trying in every way we can to push the boundaries in that space. And the way we've done that is really started to focus more with our clients in other markets, particularly on, what is the experience? How are you going to help your customer access funding? How are you going to help your customer manage their money? How are you going to help your small business customer be more profitable? How are you going to help or reward your customers for being loyal to you as a bank, for giving you their savings, for giving you their mortgage, for giving you their trust? How are you going to reward them? And in order to develop out those kind of strategies, we needed to build a different type of tech stack. So I'm hoping that many people in this room doesn't just think that we're a credit card company, although I dare say that you probably do. And that's fine. That's kind of why I'm here today, to be honest. When we think about delivering those experiences, we've built a stack that actually uses different types of technology to deliver. So I'll take one example from this slide. Let's look at the notion of manage. So the question or the experience is, how can we help your customers manage their money? This is not just about AI, although our transaction alerts capability uses elements of AI to send notifications when a customer has come close to their balances or they've spent money at a merchant category that they maybe have spent a little bit too much on recently. We've seen all kinds of different ways to use controls to inform customers. We've got controls just broadly. So say as a customer, you say, I don't really want my card to ever work overseas. So how do I turn that on and off in my app? I want to manage that. I don't trust that my children are not going to take my card and use it to buy some credits on their favorite gaming platform. So I'm going to block digital goods on my card. And we're seeing lots of different ways to do that to help customers manage their money. And then finally, how do I send money overseas or how do I do that and know how much it's going to cost? So we've got APIs that give that kind of transparency. So we're trying to use different types of digital. It could be an API form, it could be in a data model form to bring that experience to life. And there's lots more examples of that, particularly in the loyalty space and engagement space, and obviously in sending and receiving money. We're still building all of those out because, like I said at the very beginning, it never stops. It's always a new experience. Do we need to be able to help customers hold cryptocurrency in their banking app? There's some banks that are interested in doing that. We need to continually be evolving and building those capabilities so that we can deliver those experiences. But this is an unscaled model in its own form, which seems strange in such a big organisation. But it's definitely where we believe everyone needs to go and how we're supporting and continue to support our customers. So that's all I wanted to talk about today. I hope that if nothing else, you no longer think of us just as a credit card company, but if in the greatest way you'd start to think a little bit more about challenging the investment theses of your own businesses and also what you want to achieve for your customers. I do think that we're in a really great place in this part of the world. We've got really modern access to really modern technologies to help deliver those experiences, and I look forward to what else can be delivered. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ivana Tricini, Country Director of Visa, for your insightful presentation. To welcome our second presentation of today's morning, I am pleased to introduce you to our second honorable speaker, Mr. Heng Chesda, Deputy Director of Information Technology Department of the National Bank Cambodia. Please welcome Mr. Heng Chesda.
Good morning, His Excellency, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Heng Chesla from the National Bank of Cambodia. So today I have a very good honor to present you about the Bakong system. So my agenda for today, what is the Bakong system, the benefit, the implication, and the outlook. And also we look for the opportunity of the Bakong system to the society. And last but not least, what is KQR and KQR architectures. So how we go back from the history, what is the name of the Bakong, how we name the Bakong from the name of the Khmer Empire, built in the 9th century in Siem Reap. And this is the symbol that are adopted from the Bakong Temple, what we call it the independent monument. It's a replica of the Bakong architectures. So the meaning of the Bakong is from the what we call it the victory or the Gong Chei. So in this meaning, we select the name of the projects, called it Bakong. So Bakong act as there's two system in Bakong projects. So the first one we call it the backbone of the payment system, and the second one is the Bakong app and Bakong desktop. So all of these payment system we conducted in real and USD. So you can see that the Bakong act as the backbone of all of the key players. So if we look back into our journey, the long journey from the 2016, so NBC has established what we call it the technical working group on the how to explore the Bitcoin, the blockchain, and the Ethereum platform. How we explore the benefits of that into our payment system. So we conducted the case study and the conceptualization of the use case and business case. So in 2017, we start to develop our first prototype, which we select the vendors from the Hyperledger Iroha, which is the startup. So why we choose the startup, not the big company like IBM or any Ethereum? Because we think that our use case is very flexible, so that and consume a lot of resource, and we think that we must co-develop with the startup is for about our future collaboration. So in this case, the test is go on until 2019. The second quarter of the 2019, we have the soft launch with 4 participant financial institutions. And then we start the nationwide launch with with a number of institutions and customers in quarter 3 2019, and we established the white paper publication in quarter 2 2020, and finally we get achieved in quarter 3 2020 go live of the Bakong system. So this is the date that we announced the pilot test with 4 founding members Wing Bank, FTB, Akleda, and Watana Bank. And now currently we have 40 members and 20 plus more are joining Bako members, including commercial banks, specialized bank, microfinance, payment service providers. So as you can see, the number here is around 340K, the Bakong app users in October 2022. So after partnering with the Cambodian banks, so the system have reached to almost 8 million people. So as you see that this figure is just the sorry. So as you see that 340 is the Bakong app users, and the outreach to the customers is nearly 8 million, because we use the Bakong as the backbone system in the payment system, especially the electronic retail payment system. So what is the Bakong? Bakong have as I have mentioned before, the Bakong core and the extended features, including the desktop application and the mobile application. So here are the 40 members. As currently we have registered 40 members of our Bakongs. So the big achievement is we won the Nikkei Award as the innovation, technology, and impact on the country economic and social developments. So the benefit of Bakongs, with the current high rate of the mobile usage, convenient to set up account with Bakong application, and adoption of e-wallet and KYC. So we simplify it into the online. And next step, we will move to the share KYC and e-KYC, with which link to the CAMDX system. So the implication of our adoption of the Bakong system, the first implication is interoperability and the interconnectivity between the fragment payment institutions, including bank, microfinance, and PSIs. So Bakong system have the real-time fund transfers. In technical term, we do it as the instant payment in retail market. If you see, the Bakong is the first retail, what we call it, retail CBDC in the world that have run on the blockchain technologies. So with the cross-bank fund transfer, for the processing fee is zero, and it's low fee for the cross-bank transaction with 40 Bakong members. And we also have done it with Malaysia, with Maybank for the cross-border payments from Bakong, from Maybank to Bakong in Cambodia. So in this regard, the migrant workers who work in Malaysia can transfer their money through our Bakong system. Yeah. So the main important thing of the Bakong is the KHUO standard. We develop, you just print the one QR, and then 40 members from other bank, they can make a transaction through the QR payment. So the payment accepted by scan QR or type in the phone numbers or Bagong account ID, and then we can make payments. So I want to go back a little bit on our Bagong history. So we have done from a very long journey in 2016. So after we trial our first use case, we redefine our Bagong from what we call it the CBDC. So we conducted from the what we call it the peer-to-peer transfer or peer-to-peer payments. So in this regard, we also consider the KQR, the QR code payments, as the main important aspect of the payment mechanism because it's free. So it's free, it's zero cost. If you look at the developed country, they use the NFC as the main payment methods, what we call it touch and go or others near field communication payments. But regarding to this, because we think that it's low cost, everyone can be a merchant. So everyone can print the QR code and then print it and put it on their stand, and then they can be a merchant that can scan and pay at the point of sales. So it leapfrogged our complex, the sophisticated business model to the very simple that everyone can be a merchant. So another important aspect of our Bagong system is we leapfrog the process of how to make the central bank money into the commercial bank money. How we transform from the Bagong wallet, the CBDC, into the bank account. So it's directly transferred from the Bagong wallet into the member bank accounts. So this is the important message from the KXUR standard, so that every members can make a payment transaction within 40 member FIs. So the opportunity of the Bagong system to the society is, the first one is we address the issue of interconnectivity and interoperability across platform of payment operators, and with lower costs, faster speed, and more secure in the payment system. And we promote important aspect is the financial inclusion. So before 2016, we have a very low penetration of the financial inclusion because only the unbanked people, the unbanked population is huge. And now the payment wallets, only Wings, can accommodate around 90% of the market. But now you can see that many operators, many PSI, and that provide the solution to the customers. So in this case, we start from a very low penetration of the financial inclusion in 2016. Up to now, we have around 70,000 of the bank population. So the fourth is the ease use of the Khmer Reals. Because of the electronic transaction, you can scan without holding a large amount of the notes, cash, compared to the US dollar that can hold a very small amount. But if you hold the wallet, the mobile phone, you can make a payment without any holding the large cash of the banknote. So I want to go into a little bit detail on our development of the KXUR standard. So the KXUR is beyond our background system, but it's a standardization of the QR code that we adopted from EMV code, which is the international standard. And the specification we adopted is a merchant presented mode, EMV QR CPS. So this is a sample of our QR standard. This is the logo is very standard. So every bank have to comply with that, the logo standardization. And just only one QR that every bank members can make a payment to all of the 40 member banks. So by describing the KQR, one QR for all, a single QR code can accept payment via different payment service operators. So I want to mention about this KQR because it's unique. It's different from Thai QR, from Singapore QR, because it have a single translation, which is directly from the QR code into the bank account. So without any relay or any transit translation in the hub system. So you can see that this is our pioneer marketing of the KHURs. So now we have 40 members and 20 more are in the queue to go live with us. So last but not least is our KHUR architectures. So with the use of Bakong as the backbone, every member of Bakong can make payment or transfer via the KHUR schema. So from bank A to bank B to bank C and bank D, just only a single translation, so you can make a payment directly to the bank account. So I think that's all for me today. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Heng Chesda, Deputy Director of IT Department from National Bank Cambodia, for your insightful presentation. For the third presentation, Mr. Napong Thawat Putikit will join virtually through Zoom. Join me, welcome our third honorable speaker, Mr. Napong Thawat Putikit, Director at Bank of Thailand, to deliver his presentation on open banking, a regulator perspective and implementation. Is this the future of banking? Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we welcome Mr. Nompanthabot Pungtikit in a minute. Yeah. All distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Napong Thawat Pungtikit.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you now. The floor is yours, Mr. Napong Thawat.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm honored to be here. First of all, allow me to share my screen. Probably the organizer need to drop down your screen first. Okay, thank you very much. My presentation will cover, I like to change the name of the session a little bit to open data, not only open banking, because we see that the meanings would be a little bit larger or broader than open banking. And I will tell you why. So I would like to share our direction and also how we try to implement the open data or open banking in Thailand. So first of all, in this year, the Bank of Thailand has launched is what we call the financial landscape paper. This is the paper that we try to shape up the industry, the financial industry, how to move forward. There are three main things: going digital, going for sustainability, clean, and environmental sustainability, and also the resiliency. For the digital one, we have three key pillars. We call it three openness: open infrastructure, open data, and also open competition. And these three are quite related with each other. For the open data, what we expect from this pillar is that we would like to empower the customers to be able to use their data no matter where the data is stored. It could be stored in financial service provider, or it could be stored in non-bank service providers. How we can empower the customer to use or utilize this data more efficiently in order to um, make more people easier to access to financial services. And also we believe that open and exchange more data would be a key factors for more competitions and for innovation as well. So allow me to share the key four building blocks. There are four building blocks. The first one is the use cases. The second one is incentive infrastructure, and the last one is the governance structure. With these factors, we believe that it will help the industry to move toward open data and also open banking. The first one is the use cases. We want to see the use case for exchange data, not only within the bank or from open data from the bank to non-bank or to third service provider. That's the meaning of the open data, open banking, right? What we see is that in fact there could be two ways: open data from the banks to non-banks, and also open the data in non-banks to the banks to promote more efficient financial service and innovation. So we start with one use case from exchanging the bank statement information within the bank, and then we're moving toward to exchange more data. It could be financial data to financial sectors and to non-financial sectors, and also vice versa. Other data, for example, the data in telecommunication sector, they have a behavior of customer. What if we can share these two sectors, financial sector and telecommunication sectors? It could empower the customers to be able to better access to the financial service. For example, if we want to ask for the loan, right, for a certain groups of people, especially in Thailand, they do not have digital footprint in the banking services, because some of them might not use digital payments that much in their daily life, but most of them might use mobile application or telecommunication service. So what if we can combine these two sources of data together? It could empower the customers to better access to financial services. The second thing is the incentive. Incentive is quite important because it will allow the stakeholders to share with each other more efficiently. Because when we talk about the financial service providers, there are many differences of interest, right? For example, the banks, they might not want to share the data with other sectors, and also non-banks, they might not be willing to share their data as well. So the incentive structure is very important. The third one is the infrastructure that I will give the information more in detail. in later slide. And the fourth one is the governance structure. This kind of the governance of those three factors to make sure that the key main factors are together efficiently. So allow me to give you the examples of the use cases. In Thailand last year, in the beginning of this last year, and also we launched the service in the beginning of this year. We have the services called the D-statement services. It's actually the services that allow customers to request their banking statement information from many banks, but they can just request from just one bank. Or it could, in the future, it could be the lending company, non-bank service provider. For example, today in Thailand, if we apply for the loan, we might need to submit the evidence about our financial status. And the common of those is the bank statement, right? So many people, they have to like print out the bank statement and then submit it to the lending company or to the banks. But with the D statement, they can do it online. They just need to verify themselves and authenticate themselves with the banks that they want to apply for the loan. And then with the ecosystem, with the infrastructure, it will facilitate the digital banking statement submission to the bank that they have requested this kind of information. So this would reduce time, reduce cost, and make it more efficient for the service provider, enable to be able to analyze the machine readable data, not just the information on the paper or in the PDF file. This statement is a service that rely on top of the digital identification infrastructure. In Thailand, we have the infrastructure. It's called the National Digital Identity. This is the infrastructure that facilitates exchange of information. We'll start with the identification data first. So for example, the idea of the NDID is this. If you have already opened your bank account with Bank A, in this picture, it could be Bank B, for example. The Bank B, they have our information, also the picture, the biometrics from the face recognition as well. So the Bank B, they already know the customer and they have our identification information. Then if we want to apply for the loan, for example, from Bank A, we do not need to go to the bank branch and submit our identification information anymore. We can just go to the Bank A online and request the Bank A to ask for our identification from Bank B. This will help customers to be able to apply or do transactions with new party like Bank B, the Bank A that they didn't know the customer before. They can do it online and they can request the information from other participants of other banks or service providers. So with this NDID, it will serve the statement that we use the NDID as an infrastructure to authenticate and allow the Bank B to share the bank statement. Although the information about the bank statement will not be stored in the NDID, NDID will store only the log and all the record for requesting and verifying identification only. So with these two examples, the use cases for the D statement and also the infrastructure, the NDID, actually we can improve or we can develop more use cases based on this kind of infrastructure. Right now, we can exchange the identity already. In the future, we could expand these use cases. For example, we can use the NDID to expand the statement services to not only the financial sectors, but it could be to non-banks financial sector. For example, the um, lending company, or even other sector, like for example, the telecommunications company. For example, if they sell smartphones, but with the mortgage package, they may want to assess the customer's credit worthiness, so they can use this kind of information. Or if we want to apply for other service that it need the credit worthiness, we can submit a D statement or bank information to other sector. For example, if you want to do some kind of transaction with government authorities, for example, if you want to go to request or ask for apply for the visa from one embassy to go for some country, right? They may request our bank statement, so we can apply this in many more use cases. And to summarize my presentation, the key success factor is these four factors: use cases, incentive, infrastructure, and governance structure. So with these four success factors, we think that if we can do these factors together and mixing it in the appropriate ways, we can promote open banking and open data, and finally we can have better services and innovation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Napongthawat Pongtikit, Director of Bank of Thailand, for your insightful presentation. For the last presentation, Mr. Anik Islam will join virtually through Zoom. Join me welcome our first honorable speaker, Mr. Anik Islam, Regional Business Lead of Prangkas, to deliver his presentation on open banking, a fintech perspective on bridging the gap for access to financial services. Excellency, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Anik Islam.
Screen. Just give me 1 second.
Good morning. We can hear you now. The floor is yours, Mr. Anik.
Thank you. Can I just confirm if everyone can see my screen?
Yes, please.
Okay, awesome. Thanks a lot. Hello, hope everyone is having a great time at the CampTech Summit. I appreciate you all for having Brankas at this event. My name is Anik. I'm the Regional Business Development and Partnership Lead for Brankas. Briefly about Brankas, we are an open finance technology company operating primarily in emerging markets. We provide API orchestration and for banks and financial institutions, and API aggregation for fintechs. We are a team of 170 plus operating across Southeast Asia and also South Asia. And we are very much also involved in advocating global open finance on advisory and technology provider capacity. So I want to start with this slide. So this slide essentially depicts the scenario of a traditional institutionalized financial services in Southeast Asia. As you can see, most people are still unbanked. There is very little card penetration, and the transaction costs are super high, and it's a very time-consuming process for account opening and loan origination use cases. In many of the countries, they don't have any centralized functional credit bureaus as well, right? So all these factors combined, it hinders the financial access to majority of the population. So at Brankas, we believe that open banking or open finance in this case can play a fundamentally a significant role in increasing this financial accessibility, right? So I think since the title of the presentation is open banking and you can see me talking about open finance, I'll just take a brief moment to differentiate between the two. So open banking essentially involves financial data that is within the purview of banks, right? Open finance basically expands it to the likes of e-wallets, investments, insurance brokerages, etc., so that it can give you a more comprehensive overview of the financial health of a certain individual. So having said that, what are the principles of open finance, right? So open finance, the principle of open finance dictates that a customer may choose to share their financial data and link their accounts with third parties if they see a perceived benefit from doing that, right? And the financial institutions cannot be a gatekeeper for that, because at the end of the day, the customer is the owner of the data, and they can choose to share it with other third parties if they want to. And this eventually is a pro competition policy because it catalyzes innovations amongst financial institutions and fintechs, and also reduces the customer switching costs so that they're not locked in with a certain institution, and they can basically switch if they want to. And open finance goes beyond data sharing. Like there are other use cases that I will go deeper into as as I go into the later part of the presentation. So the key messages I want to drive today, these are the three key messages, and I want to start with how open finance is a new revenue driver and a new channel for sales, onboarding, and servicing. So as I said before, open finance is more than data sharing, right? So it can go beyond data sharing into areas like interoperable payments. It can help with identity and authentication for doing KYC into new financial institutions. It can help with origination use cases like account opening or card issuance or loan originations. And it can also help with investment and brokerage and building API marketplaces. So let's look at some real world examples of this sort of API enabled financial services that has spurred innovations and collaborations between financial institutions. So this is basically an example from Singapore. So in Singapore, you can connect to this platform called SG Findex to share a comprehensive picture of your financial health with an FI when you're signing up, right? And this can apply. So here, it's an example with SG Exchange, which is basically an exchange for buying and selling shares and equities. You can probably do the same for imagine when you were applying for a credit card, right? So you can still use SG Findex with just a few taps or clicks. You can share your financial data with a lender or the platform you're signing up for. You can also apply it for SME use cases. So in this use case, you can basically share your UOB bank transaction data directly into your accounting software, like Xero in this case. And then, you can easily do the reconciliation. And again, you don't have to download a PDF and then upload it again. It's a direct API connectivity, which makes it a very seamless user experience. We are also seeing a lot of SME financing use cases, which makes use of this data sharing capabilities. So Tokopedia is the largest e-commerce platform in Indonesia, and they are enabling their merchants to apply for SME financing via all these partners that you see in the bottom, right? And since Tokopedia already has the data connectivity can be very seamless, and these partners, based on their risk appetites, they can basically issue loans to these SMEs who are selling on Tokopedia platform itself. Next, we can look into account opening use cases. So Gcash, as you see here, is the largest e-wallet currently in Philippines. And during the pandemic, they actually partnered up with two prominent banks. One is BPI and CIMB to enable account opening via the Gcash app itself. So a Gcash account holder, they can open a BPI or CIMB account within the Gcash app itself without going to the BPI or GCIMB internet banking portal or the or the mobile banking app. And the interesting bit is the eKYC that has been done by Gcash, like a lot of that can be used for the account opening process. And both of these banks have seen a significant uptick of new customers once this partnership has gone live. You can also see some retail payments use cases. So here, again, I use the example of Gcash, where you can basically connect your bank account with Gcash so that you can initiate payments directly from your bank account without the use of cards. And this account to account payments is very, very useful because traditionally is a lot economical in terms of the rates that are being paid by the merchants, which we call the MDR, right? Which are a bit higher when it comes to card payments and not very suitable for merchants in this part of the world. So this sort of account to account payment is very, very useful in that case. Then you have pure banking as a service model. So NetBank is a very interesting example from the Philippines again. So NetBank is interesting because, as I wrote on the slide, they have no branches. There is no NetBank consumer facing app. It's a fully API based banking services for various different retail banking functions like account opening or card issuing or payment and remittances. So essentially what NetBank does is they use these various banking services and offer it to fintechs, which in turn offer to end customers, right? And this model, while it's pretty rare in this part of the world, it has been very popular in the West, right? There are quite a lot of examples where the regulated financial institutions are basically powering some of our favorite apps, and fintechs which are being used by tens of millions of customers on a daily basis. And beyond that, Sterling Bank has done has taken one step further, where they offer basically a marketplace where other fintechs can offer their products, and then eventually either the SME clients or the retail clients, they can basically consume these products very easily. There's much easier bank connectivity, and eventually it leads to it becomes a revenue driver for Sterling Bank itself. So you can think of this as basically an app store or a Google Play Store, but for the financial services products. So we all digging deeper into this. So our friends from the banking industry might ask that why bother going building all these APIs, building open finance capabilities or banking as a service suites, right? So this is because it can directly have a positive impact on your revenue, right? So first of all, you have more economic customer acquisition channel because you're partnering up with authorized third-party partners who are distributing your products on your behalf. The NetBank example, where they might partner up with with a company in order to acquire new customers via account opening, and this can actually greatly reduce their new customer acquisition cost. It can also drive new revenue channels. For example, if a bank has a payment API, they can actually monetize each and every transaction, right? If they have a financial data API, they can also monetize the data that is being shared by customer consent with a third party. Banks can also look into fintech marketplaces, the model that I shared about Sterling Bank. So imagine a customer is using a product from the fintech marketplace. The banks can easily then charge a fee, as a platform fee, Apple or Google does. You can also get a lot of insights from a single customer, like, based on how they're interacting with different financial apps, products, and services, which can eventually help you to upsell other products that might be suitable to this certain customer. And last but not the least, it spurs innovation. It kind of helps banks and financial institutions to create and test new products very easily. So this brings to my second key message today, which is that Open Finance tech stack has arrived and is ready even in emerging markets like in Southeast Asia. So the new open banking stack, it involves open source software, which again, lowers the cost and gives more flexibility for the banks and financial institutions adopting open finance. It's microservices based, so there is very less reworking, more standardization, is containerized so that there is automated scaling based on the demand and the usage of the services, is modular, so basically less dependent on the core banking provider, and FIs basically can pick and choose what services they want to offer. And also the APIs are standardized for internal and external users, which makes adoption a lot easier. So there, as we have been offering this sort of enterprise solutions with two bank partners in, especially in markets like Indonesia, Philippines, and other emerging markets, there are some common myths and misconceptions that we always hear about, right? So I'll take this opportunity to bust some of those myths for you. So one of them is API gateway. So API gateway, yes, it's an important part of the open banking stack, but it's not everything, right? So a lot of the times, the companies which are selling API gateway, they would tout it as the only thing that you need for your open banking, but it's always not the case. And a lot of the times, those API gateways are not optimized for financial operations. In this case, open source is often more preferable, which is more economical, and you can do a lot more customization to suit your needs. A lot of the times we hear our friends from the banking industry saying that they have APIs. While yes, some banks do, but a lot of the times these APIs are internal APIs for connecting their internal platforms, and they're not ready to be consumed by an authorized third party, right? So well-built APIs, it should it should be pretty much self-serving, and it should reduce the operational burden on the bank's IT team. And I'm pretty sure they have much more important things to worry about. Second, the other thing is IT security. That's something that we always get, but typically open APIs are more secure rather than custom bilateral connections that you have, because there is limited attack surface. And at the same time, these open APIs they are following modern standards in terms of data encryption, authentication, and monitoring via API gateway, which makes them a lot more secure than it's perceived to be. Lastly is the perception that open finance or open banking APIs will require core banking transformation, and it's not the case, because you can use your legacy core banking systems or even on-premise core banking systems, use middleware solutions in order to publish your services in the form of APIs, right? And even sometimes API layer can make it very easy to migrate to other core banking providers. So if a bank is using a legacy core banking, that is probably 20 to 30 years old, they can basically take advantage of the API layer into moving onto a more modern cloud native core banking system. The last key message is that we are still early in the adoption curve, right? So if you're following the news over the past 5 years or so, Southeast Asia, there has been a boom in startups and digital first companies, right? And a lot of consumer facing companies coming out. There are lots of internet giants being created as well, right? The likes of Grab, Gojek, ACA Group, etc. At the same time, there has been a lot of B2B SaaS providers as well, which are helping with providing functions for payroll, accounting, HR, supply chain, CRM, etc. And lastly, even traditional businesses are launching online channels, right? So imagine traditional businesses offering e-commerce channels for the same products and services. And all these types of companies, they are hungry there to offer financial services or financial connectivity for ease of their customers. But yet, from our observation, we see that financial institutions are still in a wait and see mode. They're still waiting to see other adopters, other early adopters take it. They're still in the perceptions that it's just a fringe group of customer segment, and then they are also waiting for clear regulations, right? But in some of the markets like Indonesia and Philippines, what we are seeing is a more market driven approach where some of the more digital first banks, they are basically going ahead and rolling out their banking as a service model and partnering up with third party fintech providers in order to distribute their services. And this is the this is the slide I'll leave you with, is that we are already seeing large investments and large acquisition of companies which are offering this sort of ease of connectivity, using APIs with the financial institution, which eventually benefits the end customers or the SMEs which are using the financial services. And again, even for the West, it took a long time, but now it's kind of accelerating, and I'm pretty sure we'll see the same in Southeast Asia. So yeah, I would say the time is now to look into open banking and open finance seriously, as it can help with the adoption of financial services, help with the accessibility of financial services to the masses, and basically everybody benefits: the end customers, the fintechs, and also the financial institutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Anik Islam, Regional Business Lead of Brankas, for your insightful presentation. All Excellency, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to inform you that now our event will take a 20 minutes break. Please enjoy seeing the booth outside the event hall. We also have the refreshment area in front of the startup stage where you can purchase coffee and other refreshment. Thank you so much, and please enjoy.
យើងជាចំនួនថ្មីនៃអ្នកបង្កើតយើងជំរុញឲ្យពិភពលោកកាន់តែមានភាពជឿនលឿនយើងបង្កើតគំនិតថ្មីយើងច្នៃប្រឌិតថ្មីយើងបង្កើតនូវអ្វីដែលធ្វើជីវិតកាន់តែងាយស្រួលយើងហាត់ប្រាណព្រោះសុខភាពជាទ្រព្យមិនអាចកាត់ថ្លៃបានប៉ុន្តែយើងមិនធ្វើតែម្នាក់ឯងនោះទេព្រោះពេលយើងរួបរวมគ្នាយើងធ្វើបានកាន់តែល្អយើងបរិភោគអាហារដែលមានជីវជាតិសម្រាប់រាងកាយពីព្រោះការការពារប្រសើរជាងការព្យាបាលយើងរៀបចំផែនការហិរញ្ញវត្ថុព្រោះការគិតទុកជាមុនធ្វើឲ្យអនាគតមានភាពច្បាស់លាស់យើងធ្វើអំពើល្អដើម្បីឲ្យពិភពលោកកាន់តែបវរយើងបង្កើតដីស្រឡាញ់យើងផ្ដល់តម្លៃឲ្យគ្រួសារយើងបង្កើតសុភមង្គលសម្រាប់ជីវិតយើងជាចំនួនថ្មីនៃអ្នកបង្កើតយើងជំរុញឲ្យពិភពលោកកាន់តែមានភាពជឿនលឿនយើងបង្កើតគំនិតថ្មីយើងច្នៃប្រឌិតថ្មី យើងបង្កើតនៅអ្វីដែលធ្វើជីវិតកាន់តែងាយស្រួលយើងហាត់ប្រាណព្រោះសុខភាពជាទ្រព្យម្នាស់កាត់ថ្លៃបានប៉ុន្តែយើងមិនធ្វើតែម្នាក់ឯងនោះទេព្រោះពេលយើងរួបរวมគ្នាយើងធ្វើបានកាន់តែល្អយើងបរិភោគអាហារដែលមានជីវជាតិសម្រាប់រាងកាយពីព្រោះការការពារប្រសើរជាងការព្យាបាលយើងរៀបចំផែនការហិរញ្ញវត្ថុព្រោះការគិតទុកជាមុនធ្វើឲ្យអនាគតមានភាពច្បាស់លាស់យើងធ្វើអំពើល្អដើម្បីឲ្យពិភពលោកកាន់តែបវរយើងបង្កើតក្តីស្រឡាញ់យើងផ្ដល់តម្លៃឲ្យគ្រួសារយើងបង្កើតសុភមង្គលសម្រាប់ជីវិតយើងជាចំនួនថ្មីនៃអ្នកបង្កើតយើងជំរុញឲ្យពិភពលោកកាន់តែមានភាពជឿនលឿនយើងបង្កើតគំនិតថ្មីយើងច្នៃប្រឌិតថ្មីយើងបង្កើតនៅអ្វីដែលធ្វើជីវិតកាន់តែងាយស្រួលយើងហាត់ប្រាណព្រោះសុខភាពជាទ្រព្យម្នាស់កាត់ថ្លៃបានប៉ុន្តែយើងមិនធ្វើតែម្នាក់ឯងនោះទេព្រោះពេលយើងរួបរวมគ្នាយើងធ្វើបានកាន់តែល្អ យើងបរិភោគអាហារដែលមានជីវជាតិសម្រាប់រាងកាយពីព្រោះការការពារប្រសើរជាងការព្យាបាលយើងរៀបចំផែនការហិរញ្ញវត្ថុព្រោះការគិតទុកជាមុនធ្វើឲ្យអនាគតមានភាពច្បាស់លាស់យើងធ្វើអំពើល្អដើម្បីឲ្យពិភពលោកកាន់តែបវរយើងបង្កើតក្តីស្រឡាញ់យើងផ្ដល់តម្លៃឲ្យគ្រួសារយើងបង្កើតសុភមង្គលសម្រាប់ជីវិតយើងជាចំនួនថ្មីនៃអ្នកបង្កើតយើងជំរុញឲ្យពិភពលោកកាន់តែមានភាពជឿនលឿនយើងបង្កើតគំនិតថ្មីយើងច្នៃប្រឌិតថ្មីយើងបង្កើតនូវអ្វីដែលធ្វើជីវិតកាន់តែងាយស្រួលយើងហាត់ប្រាណព្រោះសុខភាពជាទ្រព្យមិនអាចកាត់ថ្លៃបានប៉ុន្តែយើងមិនធ្វើតែម្នាក់ឯងនោះទេព្រោះពេលយើងរួបរวมគ្នាយើងធ្វើបានកាន់តែល្អយើងបរិភោគអាហារដែលមានជីវជាតិសម្រាប់រាងកាយពីព្រោះការការពារប្រសើរជាងការព្យាបាលយើងរៀបចំផែនការហិរញ្ញវត្ថុព្រោះការគិតទុកជាមុនធ្វើឲ្យអនាគតមានភាពច្បាស់លាស់យើងធ្វើអំពើល្អដើម្បីឲ្យពិភពលោកកាន់តែបវរ យើងបង្កើតដីស្រឡាញ់យើងផ្ដល់តម្លៃឲ្យគ្រួសារយើងបង្កើតសុភមង្គលសម្រាប់ជីវិតយើងជាចំនួនថ្មីនៃអ្នកបង្កើតយើងជំរុញឲ្យពិភពលោកកាន់តែមានភាពជឿនលឿនយើងបង្កើតគំនិតថ្មីយើងច្នៃប្រឌិតថ្មីយើងបង្កើតនៅអ្វីដែលធ្វើជីវិតកាន់តែងាយស្រួលយើងហាត់ប្រាណព្រោះសុខភាពជាទ្រព្យមិនអាចកាត់ថ្លៃបានប៉ុន្តែយើងមិនធ្វើតែម្នាក់ឯងនោះទេព្រោះពេលយើងរួបរวมគ្នាយើងធ្វើបានកាន់តែល្អយើងបរិភោគអាហារដែលមានជីវជាតិសម្រាប់រាងកាយពីព្រោះការការពារប្រសើរជាងការព្យាបាលយើងរៀបចំផែនការហិរញ្ញវត្ថុព្រោះការគិតទុកជាមុនធ្វើឲ្យអនាគតមានភាពច្បាស់លាស់យើងធ្វើអំពើល្អដើម្បីឲ្យពិភពលោកកាន់តែបវរយើងបង្កើតដីស្រឡាញ់យើងផ្ដល់តម្លៃឲ្យគ្រួសារយើងបង្កើតសុភមង្គលសម្រាប់ជីវិត
distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, please return to your seat. Thank you. Our event will start soon. On the next agenda, we will have a panel discussion on banking and digitalization. Bankers' perspective in adopting digitalizations and what talents and leadership to look out for. I would like to introduce our moderator for this morning panel discussion, Mr. Jim Kagai, founder and managing partner, DQD Consulting Co. Ltd. Please welcome Mr. Jim Kagai. This way, please. Next, I would like to introduce our first panelist, Mr. Baxwat Rosmetov, Head of Internet Banking for Business of the Advanced Banks of Asia. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Baxwat Rosmetov to the FinTech stage. I would like to introduce our second panelist, Mr. Han Peng Kwang, Chief Executive Officer of Wing Bank. Please welcome Mr. Han Peng Kwang. Next, I would like to introduce our third panelist, Mr. Kia Boran, Chief Executive Officer of AMK Microfinance. Please welcome. The last four panelists, Dr. Swai Hai, Senior Vice President and Senior Head of Strategic Planning Division. Please welcome Dr. Swai Hai. Without further delay, I would like to give the floor to our moderator, Mr. Jim Kagai. Thank you.
I think it's working now. Hello, everybody. It's an honor to be here to be able to share the stage together with like four distinguished speakers today. Thank you very much for attending this event. We are going to have a very open discussion about banking and digitization today. And before we go to main questions, I would like to ask each and every panelist to kind of give us a little bit of a brief of how you actually ended up being where you are today. Thank you.
Hello. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you. Good morning, His Excellency, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Jim. Good morning, our panelists. Let me introduce myself. I am Hai from ACDA Bank. Actually, I joined ACDA in 2001 with various positions, and I become the CEO of ACDA Security, one of the leading broker. It's about 7 years from 2010 to 2017. I spent some time, a couple of years in Korea to study security or about stock exchange. And then I moved to Laos to be MD and CEO for Krida Bank Laos 2018 to 2020. And I just come back last year and to be the senior head of in the strategic division. And today is really my pleasure to join the panelists group discussion about banking and digitalization. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Good morning. I feel a bit lousy outside. Hopefully, once hear us a bit better. But my name is Boran, CEO of AMK Microfinance Deposit Taking Institutions. So AMK is actually an institution where we offer different services, from lending to deposit, payments, cross-border settlements, merchant acquisitions, insurance as well. So been very lucky to be, on the stage today with everyone. And hopefully we can have, a lot more discussions on what next in Cambodia on this journey.
Thank you.
Okay, good morning. My name is Han. I'm from Malaysia. I've been staying here for 17 years already since 2005. So ever since coming here for the past 17 years, I have seen the improvement, a very drastic improvement of Cambodia over the past 17 years in terms of the infrastructures and also especially in terms of banking, right? Where you can see the Cambodia, the commercial bank, the banking industry has grown so much over the past 2 years in terms of digitalization. Let's say the best example I can think of is how Bakong has becoming the mode of so-called payment in Cambodia today, where all the banks can come together and become the platform has become so interoperable, where as long as you become a member of Bakong, you can transact with each other. So I'm the CEO of Wing Bank, and Wing Bank has just become a commercial bank in they got our license in 31st December 2020. So as a commercial bank, the bank just started commercial banking business about 1.5 years ago. But before that, Wing is already established in Cambodia since 2008. Very famous and very well known as a payment domestic remittance company. And over the years, the Wing has grew from the domestic payment to international payment, and then also partnership with Alipay, WeChat Pay, Visa, Master. And now that we are also becoming a commercial bank, we can also serve our customers more than just payment, but also in terms of loans and deposits and savings and others. And also, Wing, we are also always open to have a partnership with many SMEs and many FinTech companies in Cambodia as well to provide holistic financial services or products to them, right? So that's basically about myself and Wing Bank. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Han. Thank you.
Well, first of all, I just noticed that I'm the only person who doesn't have the name badge. I don't know where to take it from. So, but yeah, so it's just missing. So I will speak out a little louder because there's noise coming from outside. So I'm Baksod. I am head of research and development, online banking, and data analytics in ABA. I joined ABA in 2018. So before that, I was in many different fields and industries. I used to work in Dubai as an IT outsourcing company founder, and I work in the UK as a research analyst for Global Custodian magazine, and I had a few other positions in insurance and whatnot. So I came to Cambodia. It's a lovely country in 2018. Ever since, I'm loving it. There are a lot of things to do here, and that's what actually keeps me here so far. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much for your shared bios. I'm sure everybody already know you pretty much very well. And since we don't have a lot of time, let's just cut to the chase and get to it. And the first question for today would be, is it necessary for a banking executive to have a FinTech background? Whoever wants to start, you can please. Yes.
Yeah. Well, first of all, any knowledge is good. So any knowledge is good. I wouldn't say that you shouldn't have the FinTech background or you should have FinTech background. But if you look into the backgrounds of the current C-level of neobanks specifically, and the neobanks, there are good ones, N26, Revolut, Moneso, Monzo, wonderful neobanks. And their CEOs, they have FinTech exposure and FinTech knowledge. But guess what? None of them are making profit. Now, if you look at the other not neobanks, most of the C-level come from the operations background. They're not FinTech, but they're exposed to FinTech. Now, if you want to create a formula which defines the success of a bank with the position or the background of the executive team in a bank, there will be a very high correlation of team from the operational background with the success of the bank, which is not making a loss. But if you want to do the same for the FinTech, there is no correlation. You can actually check, you don't trust my words, you can check yourself. There is absolutely no correlation that success of a bank depends on the FinTech background at all. So from that perspective, I would say it's good to have the knowledge, but it's not a necessity for the success of a bank. So this is what I can basically just point out.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, from a point of view, executive, right? Executive coming, whether it's good to have a fintech background. For bank executive, I would say it's very good that they can have a fintech background. Fintech, okay, what I understand from fintech is that fintech are there because they are there to solve all the pain points that customers are facing. Or many banks customer have a lot of pain points, and this is where the fintech comes in. They solve the pain points and they come up with a solution to resolve the pain points, and this is where they become so popular, or their valuation become tenfold, hundredfold over the years. So for a banker, if you have the fintech mindset, then you can come and join the bank. You can see what is the current process that the bank have, maybe the traditional process that the bank have. Then you can think about ways as you interact with customer, as you interact with the employee. Then you can think about ways how to solve the pain points that the traditional commercial bank are facing, and you can come up with a solution. And that is where you can add value as a bank executive with a fintech background. That's my point of view. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, maybe I add a little bit to our previous two speaker. I think the most important is always, what would be the end games in terms of a customer touching points. I think different banks would have different customer segment, which not always that, require a huge technologies and investment to actually, keep the business profitable. And I think at the end of the day, is always, are we still, running the company and make money? I think that's different as I think Ivana, speak this morning. There are fintech company who acquire customer regardless of the cost and continue to actually make loss after like 5-10 years of operation. So I think to me, I think exposure is important. I think executive team should continue to learn, understand on the evolutions of technologies and how can this resolve the pain points of the company. But I think do not overdo on just technologies and assuming if we invest in technology alone, we would be able to actually resolve all the problems we face.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Jim, for the important question. I think when you ask question to the banker, mostly they will say yes. But for me, I think it's hard for me to say no. Let me ask to the audience. So I think I see some of you is the outstanding director, CEO, or top management from bank or financial institution. So with this question, let me see how many persons say no. Anyone say no? No. So I think first I may say no and then say yes. So how the CEO they can have or get the fintech background, and is it necessary? So I can observe that the top management or CEO they can get the fintech background, the knowledge, the experience from at least 3 ways. The first one they can get from their graduation. They can have master, bachelor, master, or PhD in the financial technology. A second one, they can have the self-learning, reading, or observation. And the third one, they may get from their work. I mean, the work build you, like the Cambodia proverb say, ការងារតាក់តែងមនុស្ស is the work BAU. So with these three ways to get the fintech background, the first point I say no because when I check among the 59 commercial bank in Cambodia, so only 15 banks that they disclose a part or detail of their CEO background, and most of them, about 80% of them, they don't have the graduate or from the bachelor or master or graduate from the university in terms of the fintech, but they can get from the second and third way. So that's why I say no and then yes. Is the point because when you see all the bank or bank microfinance, mostly they can get a profit or profitable. So it reflects to point 2 and point 3 that most of the bank CEO or top management or microfinance also financial institution, they have the fintech background that they can lead during this digital era. That recently you may see more than half of the commercial bank and also more than half of the PSI, they launched the fintech product, especially mobile banking. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I just want to add to this one. Thanks for mentioning that. This reminds me, I was also checking the LinkedIn profiles of the CEOs in Cambodia. So probably if you go to who viewed your profile, that would be me. And I was trying to understand from the Cambodian perspective, if anyone has a fintech background. Most don't. Most don't. The same with the Singapore. Take the biggest bank in Singapore, DBS, or the top 5 banks in Singapore. Or take the Thai banks, Kung Sri Bank and whatnot, all the top 10. None of them, I can tell you, you don't have to trust my words, do the Google search. None of them have the fintech background. I think for the bank to be successful, we just need to answer a very simple question. I would call this very extreme question. Let's think we have a CEO who has wonderful leadership skills but zero fintech knowledge. Can he lead the bank? So this is question number 1. The other one, the person is super fintech but zero leadership skills. Now, if you put the weights on 2 extremes, you will understand which one comes first. Fintech is a knowledge that is good to have, but not a necessity. That's what I would like to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Just a little bit. So yeah, thank you, Besot. I feel as some of you as a CEO or top management here, it reminds me that I used to listen to the interview of a famous CEO, and they talk what is the qualification to be a CEO. Sorry, now I'm not a CEO, but some CEO here and also the audience. So at least 3 point qualification, basic qualification that to be the CEO, and in that part it's all have the fintech background. So I can say ICM. So the first one is to be intelligent. So when you are a CEO, I'm sure that you are the smart guy. And charisma, so you can have a charming face, charming behavior that you can attract the people or can build a network. And the last one is very important, that is a part of the fintech background, is you can manage your resource. Even you have the background of or not the fintech, about the fintech, but you can manage the people that have the fintech background. For instance, like Isida, we have a long and deep experience of our group managing director, and we have the second key person that they graduate in fintech, about fintech, and then also they can manage 200 people in terms of IT and IT security. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, I have a follow-up question for you guys. Some of you are saying that obviously knowledge is a key to success and to being a good leader and to being a good executive or the CEO, regardless. And so fintech background is somewhat non-existent in Cambodia as of yet. We haven't had it like, say, 10 years ago. So it's a pretty new thing. So when you are hiring your executives as CEOs, for instance, or you're doing some interviews, what is the criteria of the people that you would want to kind of drive that financial institution from a perspective of fintech? What is that something that you're looking for in your potential candidates?
Well, I probably will skip this question because I don't nominate CEOs in the bank. So I think I should pass it to C-levels if so.
because in the commercial bank, we have so many departments and so many positions. Some of the positions does not require the person to be a fintech minded. If you employ an accountant, for example, or CFO in a bank, I don't think you need that guy to be very fintech minded, because what he needs to do is to deal with the numbers, make sure the numbers are properly accounts are properly generated every month, quarterly, yearly, right? But when it comes to innovation or product development, then I will believe that I will need that guy to be very fintech minded. I want this person to come in to look at what the bank is offering today and see what the bank can can improve on our existing product to be more innovative, to be more user friendly, for example, or come up with more innovative product, new ideas, new product that can help the bank grow further, serve more customers more efficiently, cheaply, and efficiently. So I would say yes, certain position I would want that person to be a fintech background, but otherwise you don't need them to be a fintech background for me.
I don't know. I may not get a job, if at that time the fintech is one of the criteria. I'm accountant, so I only look at numbers and see how much we spend and how much we earn. But no, I think um, I would say, I think in my case, when I look at my executive teams, not the CEO role, but I think like, a C-suite kind of position, I think I would generally, I think everyone always should have a mindset of continuous learnings and adaptations, and be able to actually understand as deep as possible on operations challenges. And I think without these mindsets and be able to understand the roots and the depths of the issue, I would say it's a bit difficult to find a solution. And to me, again, I think technologies to me is enabler. It's not a real solution by itself. So unless I think the teams that we have be able to understand the issues and then say this issue can be resolved, I think, effectively by this implementation of the technologies or the solution. I think otherwise it's just a nice to have. Where you say someone can say, this is a fantastic ideas or new technologies. I think like example talking about AI. People can tell us, it's a big data AI, right? But what are we trying to solve the problems? Are we really know how to use it, or it's just like, a fancy name which now had been, posted on Facebook, and then we all try to say, yeah, we should move to big data, AI, but are we really needs that now, or are we really get into it now? I think that's where I would say balancing between, these new hypes kind of fancy technologies and a real challenges operation, I think is important, and also a nightmare for CEO, because you would have your team who actually really want to go very fast on one things, and you have a team which actually go very slow, but then you also have to manage the profit. And where the two problems coming, because one spending a lot of money without probably making money, and another one would actually probably make some money. And so I think these are not an easy job, and I think having teams who understand these two, I think would be to me very important.
Thank you, Jim. Yes, sure. Like Basot, I'm not a CEO now, but I used to be CEO in Laos. And I see Dr. Lee also joined as outstanding director of the Joe startup. I think to recruit the staff, it depends on the position that we need. It's not just focused on the fintech background, but I think it's focused on their intention. So mostly, or in general, to recruit the staff, it should be at least 2 points. So the first point, they should have the knowledge or their background, I mean their graduation or the level of education that they have. It depends on the position that we recruit. It's a normal staff, management, or any level of our college. And second one, I'm sure that even you cannot see, but we consider about morality. So what is the ethic? What is the behavior that they have? If you just recruit the staff that they have just the knowledge, but they don't have like proper morality, I think even they have a high fintech background knowledge or any part that we need, but I'm sure that the top management will hesitate to recruit such a staff. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, I understand. Well, Bigzot, since you were the one left out saying that you're not a CEO and you're not hiring people, let's assume that you are hiring people for your personal department. I mean, the department where you are the head. So thinking about your candidates, do you give out some key pointers to an HR department saying that I would prefer them to be from a fintech background, or you don't actually have anything to ask from your HR department?
No, I think in most CV or vacancies, you see this job requirements. They say required language skills, English, Khmer, Chinese is preferred, right? So in my case, fintech is preferred, but that's not the requirement. That's why I keep this as an optional thing. It's good to have, but not a necessity once again.
Okay, okay. Thank you very much, guys. Moving on, going to question number 2. What are the advantages if the financial institutions such as banks or an MFI adopt a startup mindset? We all understand what a startup mindset is, right? Well, some of you come from like very early startups yourselves, so if you could please share your view on that.
Well, I can say that historically, Wing was a startup. It actually was a startup because it started up as a totally new banking model in Cambodia in 2008. When actually the National Bank Cambodia, together with a team from ANZ Royal at the time, went to Kenya and to study about M-Pesa, how M-Pesa was so successful in Kenya in terms of money transfer, mobile payment, and this is where when they came back and Wing started off as a mobile payment company. So that time Wing was already a startup, and we that time in 2008 2009 they started up they to do the business, but it failed in the beginning due to one reason or another. Maybe that model, M-Pesa model, is not so applicable in Cambodia, right? Then thereafter, Royal Group actually came in and bought over the company in 2009, and they go out, they study the market, and they started the agent banking, where the customers at that time are not very digital savvy. Customers in the provinces still like to deal with a real person, a human being, and therefore Wing combined the digital capability with the human being by offering this Wing agent model, and from there the company actually grew by leaps and bounds over the years. So as a startup, over the years, Wing has already introduced many innovative products and services over the years in terms of financials and non-financial as well. Right, we are one of the first in the Cambodia, whereby a partner. We are saying we are not a competitor for all the banks. We are a partner for all the banks. And today, because of our stand as we want to be the partner for all the banks, we are partnering with more than 90 financial institutions in Cambodia, so that we can help the borrowers from these banks and MFI to pay their monthly installment at any not true money, sorry, at any Wing agent today. So that's how inclusive we want to be in terms of financial inclusivity, working together with other FinTech and financial institutions to serve the people in Cambodia. So in terms of mindset, FinTech, I would say if I want to engage a new employee today, I want the person also to have this kind of same mindset. So FinTech startup is quite similar in the sense that we want this person to be somebody that can think about solutions to help resolve the pain points that customers are facing, or even the pain points that banks are facing. Maybe in the internal processes, there are so many layers of bureaucrats to overcome, to come up with the solutions. Maybe this person can come in and help the bank internally to streamline the process, to make it easier, faster, to come up, to produce or to introduce new banking products to the market without lots of red tapes involved. So I would like this person, to be able to think creatively, think outside the box, and to have this so-called startup mindset. Yeah, thanks.
Sure, thank you.
I hope there is somebody from True Money. They just got free commercial.
Be cute.
I know. But anyway, so first of all, before talking about the startup mindset, I would like to understand what the startup. I would like to deep dive into what startup is. To be honest, startup existed since the beginning. As the new terminology. Now we have the new terminology. This reminds me, one case I remember, I was working for an ERP company, and we were doing the training to one of the VIP customers. It's an online accounting, it's an online ERP system. So after 1 hour of training, so customer asked, is it the cloud solution? I was shocked because cloud was a buzzword. Cloud and internet is the same thing. So when we have the startup now, we are actually giving it a new name, but in essence, it's the same. But over time, context changed, people change, things change. So startup is getting little, in my opinion, is getting little ambiguous meaning. Startup has an ambiguous meaning because startup is associated with entities, with people, and people are not stable. That's why you can call it's a good startup, it's a bad startup. So what I would prefer to refer to the startup as a lean methodology. Lean. So this is pretty much what the startups are doing, but you cannot say this is a bad lean methodology, this is a good lean methodology. But you can call the startup because I'm sure there are people among you who invested in startup, they failed. I mean, because 90% of the cases, they actually fail. So in my opinion, so first, you should adopt, as a banker, you should adopt lean methodology. You should be lean. You should not be taken hostage by your prior success because this is exactly what kills any business. Not only bank, any business will die if you're taken hostage by your prior success. That's why I've been reading somewhere, they even mentioned innovation as a threat to yesterday. Now, I'm pretty much sure you all remember the case of the Kodak. It's the company that created the industry itself. 90% of films were sold from the Kodak. And where they are now? Nowhere. Why? Because they thought one of the digital cameras the scientists created was not good enough. So they ditched the idea. Now Kodak is nowhere. Because they thought we're already making lots of money, the industry is ours. So that's why I think for any bank, it doesn't have to be startup mindset. It should be lean mindset. Lean, it means you are always improving the processes, reducing the cost, trying to increase the revenue. Because if you think from the perspective of the C-level are measured in a very simplistic way as opposed to any other employee or staff in the bank. Why? Because they are measured, they have very specific KPIs. It's a very specific KPI, it's called performance. So the performance comes from what? We have this money, you need to increase the revenue, reduce the cost. You have the market, you need to reach out to market the soonest possible time, but have the bigger market share. You have this exposure with the market share and so on and so forth. So the decisions and the performance of C-level in the banks are very easy. It's all about the performance. But startup mindset does not guarantee. I would rather put it this way. Lean methodology, lean mindset is what actually going to guarantee any business, regardless a bank, not a bank, or any financial institution. That's why, yes, this is how I would put, never be hostage of your prior success. Keep pushing, improve the processes, and this is where you will be. But as a startup, I have very ambiguous feeling about the word startup because I've seen bad startup, I've seen good startups. So the mindset is also ambiguous for me, but methodology remains the same. That's why I would put it this way: lean is what the banker should go for.
Yeah, so the question was, what is the advantage of kind of using, whether you're referring to it as a lean methodology, whether it's just a startup mindset, but in general, banks in Cambodia historically have been very old school, very traditional, very historic per se. And now, since there's a new trend called, startup mindset, where things are super vivid, they're very energetic and stuff like this. The question is not whether you should or shouldn't, but what advantages or disadvantages it kind of brings to the picture.
No, this is exactly what I'm saying. When you have a bad startup mindset, it's going to bring all the disadvantages you can think of. If you have a good startup mindset, it's going to bring all the good sides of the startup mindset. That's why, but if you follow the lead, it will always bring the good ones. So startup mindset, you see, the startup is not only the terminology of, building, observing, getting the feedback, and developing it again. It's more than that, because we're talking about the passion of the people. So any business has a passion. So but businesses existed even without the terminology of the startup. So what we're currently talking, is it good to be kind of a profit-oriented, at the same time think of continuous improvement? What are the advantages of it? I mean, there's always advantages. This is how businesses work. So I wouldn't call this advantage. There's an advantage of the pros, but it's just the mindset. It's always good to have the mindset to improve the processes continuously. There's never a pro. There's no con. There's no problem with this, in my opinion. So if you have lean methodology, you follow this lean, the mindset, there is always a good thing. Anything bad, for God's sake, I mean, just we cannot control everything, right? But we still go on. For me, there's nothing bad as long as you're a lean mindset oriented person.
Sure. Do you guys want to add anything to the adoption of the startup mindset within
Yes, thank
your
Jim.
organization?
The question is about what's advantage for the startup mindset. When I hear the word startup mindset, I can say the incorrect message that everyone have the startup mindset. However, another question asks why we need to have digital startup, because the level of startup mindset is different. That's why we all have the official body or the institution that encourage people or encourage everyone to have the startup mindset. You can see when you go shopping to the supermarket and you are on the queue to pay for the goods, and then you can see around 1/3 of the people that they use app, they use card under the digital era, and still have many people that they use cards. So of course they use the bank service, but they not yet have the level, a bit higher level of the startup mindset in terms of the digital. For the banking service, when you talk about the startup mindset, I think it's about the approach that the bank or the institution that they integrate introduce the product in the faster way to the customer. I can observe 3 factors for the startup mindset for the bank and financial institution. I call MML. The first one is we make the product, and second one we develop or make the product. Second, we can measure the product by introduce the product at the minimum visible level to the customer, and then we can get the feedback from the customer and then learn to improve it. I think most of the bank, they not just wait until the very excellent or full complete of the product and launch to the market. So for the advantage, I consider about the result or the achievement of the bank and financial institution. I can raise 2 cases. The first case, maybe it's not the success case, it's the fail case. I hear the Nokia CEO, he said, we do not do anything wrong, but somehow we fail. The world is changed too fast. It is the latest speech of Nokia CEO when Nokia was acquired by Microsoft in 2016. But another case I saw raised about Exida Bank that we start in 1993. and then transformed to be a bank in 2000. It is new bank to the market at that time. And 5 months later, we have the startup to invest in the technology core banking system, Terminal Globus, with a couple million at that time, but our asset is not much at that time. And 7 years later, I observed that we have the record that ACDA became the top bank in terms of deposit in 2008, and then also the top bank in 2010 for deposit and asset. Our asset at that time is over 1 billion. So, and during that time also we start to invest in EBS service, electronic banking service from 2007. And now we remain among the top in the banking sector in Cambodia. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, shall we move on then? I'm looking at Boran and it's like, yeah, these guys have already mentioned everything. So, okay. Moving on to the next question. In your opinion, because Mr. Han has already mentioned that there's a lot of partnership going on between FinTech, commercial banks, MFIs. In your personal opinion, do you think there is a need for that kind of cooperation? And if there is, then what kind of good it brings to Cambodian people in general? The cooperation between banks, FinTechs, startups, MFIs, and so on. Anything in the financial market. Anyone can.
Yeah, I can start. I would say I think the cooperation is always very good for customer, and I think put back I think few example. I think Bakong is probably one of the good example where I think NBC launched it as a interoperability backbone which allow every bank customer to be able to cross platforms. Recently, I think that your startup launched the eKYC or ID verification solution, which allow I think bank fintechs to be able to verify their customer much faster and easier. So I think these are very important. And I would say in Cambodia, as we all live here, I think the level of collaboration within our sector are still very minimal. Very minimal. I think everyone still see it as their own advantage, proprietary customer base. If you look at all the big boys, it's very close ecosystems. It's hard to actually attach to anyone. Even you look at, again, not complaining, but sharing the experience, you look at even government body, how easy for anyone to attach to government payments products. So I think, to me, I think the level of collaboration are still very limited in Cambodia with different reasons. It's no right or wrong. It's different reason. So I still believe, I think the collaboration would bring better value to a customer. It probably will bring better services to our customers and within the sector. And I think also probably create, I think, better innovations among the sectors as well. I do hope, I think I think regulatory body would, I think, do a lot more to enable this, because I don't think it's only a private sector alone can act, because a number of challenges is actually always linked to the regulations, including regulatory frameworks, policies, and also data exchange management and privacies and so on and so forth. So I think these are important topics, and I do hope, I think both governments and private sector can do a lot more to actually bring Cambodia to probably a better fintech stage. Because as of now, we do our own pace. Collaboration are still very limited.
Yeah, I agree. I completely agree on this one. I just want to add just a few things about the banks, fintech, and startup company cooperation. I think any cooperation is beneficial. You cannot be a solo traveler and succeed. Because if you look at the Nobel Prize winners in the first half of the 20th century, they were mostly individuals. I think just 3 or 4 teams got the Nobel Prizes. But the second half of the 20th century, you have 50-50. So basically 50% of Nobel Prize winners were granted to teams who were cooperating. So the word itself, cooperation, will always bring a benefit. Now, should banks cooperate or not cooperate with startups and fintechs? Now, I can tell you, banks, they are a little slower when it comes to innovating, creating new products, as opposed to fintechs, because fintechs are not facing the compliance and risk and all sort of things. So they are much more agile than any financial institution. Because the banks are slower, and in terms of innovation, there is always, banks leave a space for fintechs to fill in the gap. So fintechs are filling in the gap that banks could not cover because of their slowness. Now, if we come back to the case of Cambodia, now Cambodia has a huge mobile phone, smartphone penetration. I think it's about 70%. 70% of the people here have smartphones, which is 11 million people here. Is there any bank in Cambodia who has 11 million customers? I don't think so. So what banks should do in order to reach out to so many people is to leverage and cooperate with fintech companies who have much wider network and access, because fintechs usually develop solutions for mobile phone and devices. So as a bank, in order to reach the more unbanked population, we have to cooperate with fintechs so that we can reach out to more people. Otherwise, there's I think it's barely, it's not possible. It's a long journey otherwise if we do solo trip.
Okay, thank you.
You look at many global banks in the world today. They either compete with the fintech, or they collaborate with the fintech, or they buy up the fintech. If the fintech is very successful, like just now on the screen was Visa buying over Tink, TINK, for $2 billion. Visa got very deep pocket. So for us, I mean, this is all happening globally already. The banks, either you compete, or you collaborate, or you buy up the fintech to help you grow up, or so that the fintech will not compete with you to serve your customers. And I see in Cambodia there are more collaborations. Generally, what I see in the banking industry in Cambodia, banks usually they like to collaborate with the fintech to offer better, more services to their clients. Wing Bank, for example, we collaborate with this Bungie. Bungie is an accounting company providing accounting platform, and Wing Bank actually collaborate with Bungie to provide this basic bookkeeping service to all the SMEs that come under the Wing Bank platform. So that's one idea. That's one example of collaboration that Wing Bank have with a company. Another collaboration that Wing Bank have, for example, is with one company in the health tech sector, very new health tech sector called Pekyon. So Pekyon is a platform that connect all the hospitals and doctors and clinic with the patient. And Wing Bank actually collaborated with them in terms of facilitating payment services. So for me personally, I would say Wing Bank in Cambodia, from what I see generally, banks are very open to collaborate with the fintech, basically for the win-win solution, or win-win-win solution for the bank, for the fintech, as well as for the clients. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ha. Thank you.
Thank you for the question again in terms of the pro and con for the partnership, bank, fintech, and startup. Let me say a bit simple that everyone born with the partnership. Yeah, we born with the partnership in the family, friend, and network in the society. And everyone also get the natural certificate. I can say at least everyone have 3 natural certificate, because I study law, master law, and then I got the DBA. But in terms of the legal perspective, you got 3 natural certificate. I have 2 now. Boran also have two. Another friend have two. So the first certificate is the born certificate. I think everyone have the born certificate. When you born, you register your certificate. And second one, when you got married, it's a life partnership. So you got the marriage certificate. I got two, right? Born certificate and marriage certificate. And the final of our life, everyone not yet get. Me too. I get two. Yeah. So back to the partnership. I think for the benefit, like the banker always said, if you go far, you go alone. Sorry, if you go fast, you go alone. If you go far, we go together. So the partnership will provide the mutual benefit both in cash and in kind for bank, fintech, and also startup. For the con, we can imagine is of course the cost-bearing agreement, some term. For example, when we hire or we got supply from the fintech, so we have to have agreement. It cost-bearing with there. Even we change the request, also is cost to the bank. So it depends on if we have the internal resource, so we can build our fintech product. But if somewhere that we want to consider the time to the market, so we have to be partner or get supply from the fintech or support or any initial idea from the startup. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So as a representative of FinTech community in here and probably one of the very only voices being present on stage, I would like to ask all of the bankers and MFI representative here, what kind of FinTechs are you actually looking into having cooperations with? So that, there are a room full of young and bright minds, and then they're like, yeah, I want to have my FinTech startup and I want to work with the bank. What kind of startups and FinTechs would you actually be considering and doing like partnerships? Can you please tell us?
Well, I will not tell, so I'll just skip. We have plans. We do have plans with fintechs. We are already in discussions, but yeah, that's the news for the next year.
That's ABA, guys, okay? Remember that guy.
What we were looking for in FinTech is basically how can the FinTech solution help us to serve our customers better. So we start with customer centricity. How can we serve our customers better? If the FinTech can add value to Wing Bank to serve our customers better, then we want to collaborate with them. So for example, just now I mentioned about working together at Bungie to help serve our SME customer better by providing them with some basic bookkeeping services. So that's one thing. Second thing is about our customer health. So that's why we have this collaboration with the Pet Yun in order to provide our customers with the ability to connect with the doctors and nurses and hospitals in Cambodia. So we are open to any kind of InsurTech is another possibility that we can work with. As long as the insurance company can work together with us to provide insurance to our customers, life insurance, general insurance, we will work together with them as well. So any sector, we are open to work as long as we can have your so-called solution to better serve our customers. Right. Okay. That's my view.
Thank you, Mr. Hao. Thank you.
I just probably add on what we actually looking at. I think anyone who would have business proposition, we would be very welcome. We work a lot with many fintechs. Some of them are in the room also. But I think one of the challenges in which I would want to mention is, is it, I think the collaboration is not only, to show the public that we, sign MOU and agree to work together, but it's always what business underlying on the collaborations. And I think the challenge is always is very unclear sometimes on what may bring the business together. And therefore, I don't have statistics, but you can looking at different day, different week, different month, there will be a lot of MOU signing between here and here, right? But even after 1 year, the product never get out to the market. So I think for me, I would be very welcome on every fintech. But I also want to looking at the fintech who have very clear idea what they want to do and not jumping from one to another so fast. And I think that probably the challenge of the startup, which I think you are talking about, that sometimes they have so many ideas because they are entrepreneur, they are startup, and the idea, keep jumping from day to day, which I think is hard for us to even keeping up. And therefore, then I think this collaboration generally would actually come to end without even starting yet. So I would encourage that I think come to talk to us, but I think let work and get things out. And I think don't try to get too many partners at the same time. I also saw startup who come and have 5 different banks, at the same time, but then they don't have resource to actually even support and focus. And then at the end of the day, I think all 5 fail at the same time as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Just a bit. I think the question is easy, but it's not easy to answer that to specific that what kind of fintech or startup that we want to collaborate. But mostly the top management of the bank, BFI, they will open to, especially ACIDA, we are open to have the partner. We have the partner here, also competitor. Yeah. So we open for all partner, especially the fintech or startup that reflect or respond to the need to the market or to the customer. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, guys. And I think that would be the last question for today's session. And we are going to be talking about open banking. What's open banking, and is it already here? Is it the future? Is it not? Please share your thoughts.
Open banking. I think yesterday we had a gala dinner, and I was sitting with very intellectual people, and during the discussion, just very shortly popped up the word open banking is so dangerous. Because it's open, right? So this is what you're referring to. You would never ask somebody to open the wallets in front of anyone, or you would not ask someone, in my case, to open your ABA accounts list in front of another person. So the open is little tricky word. I think this is what really bothers people. But at the end of the day, open banking is about secure interoperability. So it's about secure connectivity. So from that perspective, so open banking is really important. I think for open banking to thrive, there are a number of homework that needs to be done. There are a lot of tasks that need to be done. But I believe, so the open banking would be the future, definitely. Because at the end of the day, we just discussed the question about the fintechs, right? So fintechs, they are reaching to a wider audience, and they need access to banks. They really need access to banks. The fintechs that are starting in Cambodia, they had banks backing them up from the very get-go. So that's why you need to have the banks. Fintechs should leverage open banking APIs in a secure manner. But I think at the same time, the legal framework should be ready for that at the same time. But definitely, this is what I think. Open banking is the future. This is what we need to head for.
Thank you. Thank you for your thoughts.
Yeah, I think open banking is the future, but it's actually now in the present already started. That's a very good example is the session before this session, where all the speakers from the Bank of Thailand, even from the representative from the National Bank of Cambodia, talking about Bakong, and the representative from the Bank of Thailand talking about open banking in Thailand, it's already been implemented. Right? And then higher than that is not just open banking today, but it's also open finance, where customer not just share your banking data with each other, but also your other data like your telco, like your telco data, how much credit you buy for the month, how much usage, how much utility data. So all this already happening in the world where customers have the option to share your data that you have with other financial service provider so that that financial service provider can come up with a personalized solution to serve you better. So in Cambodia, I would say that it is coming very soon, or maybe it's already happening, where through Bakong, for example, where I can use my Bakong now to transfer my money from one bank to another bank or from one bank to another PSP instantly and free of charge for now. So, and also I noticed that in Bakong also, there's one feature that very soon where all the banks need to incorporate is so that in the Bakong app, you can actually link your bank account into your Bakong app. And from there, using your Bakong app, you can have access to your bank accounts with other banks, whether it is Wing, whether it's ABA, AMK. You can actually have an overall view of your balance in Bakong app. That's what I foresee. What Bakong is doing today. So open banking is good for customers in the sense that it reduces the pain point for you when you want to apply for banking services, where if you share your data with all the banks, have access to your data, then the bank can easily provide a banking solution, a loan for you, a credit card for you instantly on the spot because of the data that you share with them that is already being verified and authenticated by other financial service providers. So, yep, that's the future, and I'm sure it's happening in Cambodia already, one way or another.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Han.
Jim, yeah, thank you. It's a comprehensive question about open bank. Open banking is the future. So, yeah, as Mr. Han said, we can see the previous session about open banking, open finance, open data, right? Yeah. So I read a book about Bank 4.0. I think maybe most of you heard about Industry 4.0, but I also read the Bank 4.0. So I realized that the open banking is referred to the Bank 4.0. It means that bank, financial institution, or enterprise, they will integrate their company to the modern technology like Internet of Things, cloud computing, AI, big data, or other advanced technology. Yeah, it is about the Bank 4.0. So it in Cambodia, it's not just the future, but it happened in around the latest decade. I mean, a decade already that the open banking is happening in Cambodia. That is about that bank anywhere and never a brand or never a bank. It means that when you have the mobile app like Asimla Mobile or mobile banking of other, now I observe that the single person or single customer, they not just have one app in their phone, but they have a couple of few apps in their phone. So it's easy for them to choose, oh, this one is discount, this one they get reward, or this one they have a gift. So they can have a choice. So I mean, finally, we can say the customer is the winner. The customer always win. That's why at the minimum level or the core of the open banking or Bank 4.0, it means that most of the people, they can access to the minimum level or minimum service of the banking. You can open account, you can do the bill payment, or you can do the transfer or other feature in the mobile banking. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
No, I fully agree to everyone. And as we all agree, we can start working together tomorrow. So.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I think we have just a minute, and we would probably be open for a question from the audience if there's anybody there wishing to ask this gentleman here any kind of questions. Probably not. Probably people are just too hungry because it's lunchtime. Well, thank you very much for your time, gentlemen. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Jim Kagai, for your productive moderating of the discussion. I would also like to thank Mr. Baxford Rosmetov, Mr. Hang Peng Kwan, Mr. Kia Boran, and Dr. Swahai for your insightful discussion. And now, here come to the end of our panel discussion. All Excellency, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the organizer of the FinTech stage of Cambodia Tech Expo 2022, I would like to sincerely thank our honorable presenters, Ms. Ivana Trocchini, Country Director of Visa, Mr. Heng Chesda, Deputy Director of IT Department from National Bank of Cambodia, Mr. Napongtavat Pongtikit, Director at Bank of Thailand, and Mr. Nick Islam, Regional Business Lead of Prangkas. And I also would like to extend my sincere thanks to our moderator, Mr. Jim Kagai, in moderating today's panel discussions, as well as to our three key panelists, Mr. Baxford Rosmetov, Head of Internet Banking for Business of the Advanced Bank of Asia, Mr. Han Peng Kwang, CEO of Wing Bank, Mr. Kia Boran, Chief Executive Officer of AMK Microfinance, and Dr. Swahai, Senior Vice President and Senior Head of Strategic Planning Divisions of Esolida Bank, for your insightful and productive discussion. I believe the audience here have learned a lot from you. Before closing the event, I would like to inform that we are having an afternoon session with the two presentations and two panel discussion. The first presentation is about InsurTech, technology and insurance, followed by the panel discussion. The second presentation is about cybersecurity in developing economy, also followed by the panel discussion. All Excellency, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your interested participation in FinTech Stage of CTX 2022. Here comes to the end of day 2 morning session. Your presence here is highly appreciated. We look forward to seeing your participant in the afternoon session. Thank you so much.